As modern humans, we suffer from a specific kind of arrogance. We look at the smartphones in our hands, the rovers driving across the surface of Mars, and the artificial intelligence shaping our world, and we believe we are the undisputed pinnacle of existence. We are taught that historical progress is a straight, unbreakable line. First came the wheel, then the steam engine, and finally the silicon chip. We assume that every single day is a step forward from the last, and that the people who lived thousands of years ago were simple, primitive beings entirely disconnected from the concept of high technology. But what if we told you this straight line is a massive illusion? What if humanity actually reached a breathtaking level of technological sophistication thousands of years ago, only to completely forget it, burying it under the ashes of fallen empires and the dark waters of the sea? Welcome to Beyond the Known. Today we are opening a door that history tried to keep shut. We are going to examine an object that defies every rule of historical progress, a device that, according to everything we know about science, simply should not exist. Our story does not begin in a pristine laboratory, but in the violent, unforgiving waters of the Mediterranean Sea. It was the spring of 1900. A group of Greek sponge divers, led by Captain Dimitrios Kondos, were sailing back to their homes when a sudden, terrifying storm blew their small vessels violently off course. Seeking shelter from the deadly waves, they dropped anchor near a tiny barren island called Antikythera, located between Crete and the Peloponnese. Once the storm passed, they decided to explore the waters below. A diver named Elias Stadiatis put on his heavy brass diving suit and descended 45 meters into the dark, crushing depths. When he was pulled back to the surface minutes later, he was trembling in absolute horror. He told his captain that the seafloor was covered in a pile of dead naked men and horses. Captain Kondos, thinking his diver had lost his mind from nitrogen narcosis, dove down himself. What he found wasn't a graveyard of humans, but a graveyard of an empire. It was the massive wreckage of an ancient Roman cargo ship that had sunk around 60 BC. The dead men were actually magnificent, life-sized bronze and marble statues. For nearly a year, the divers risked their lives, some dying from decompression sickness, others paralyzed, to bring up priceless treasures, jewelry, ancient coins, exquisite glassware, and monumental sculptures. It was the greatest underwater archaeological discovery of the 20th century. But among the glittering gold and flawless marble, there was something else. A heavily corroded, green-oxidized lump of bronze and wood, no bigger than a shoebox. It was calcified, covered in seashells, and looked like a piece of worthless sea debris. For 2 years, this ugly green rock sat ignored in the back rooms of the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. No one cared about it. Why would they, when they had perfect statues of gods and heroes to study? But on May 17, 1902, an archaeologist named Valerios Stais was examining the calcified lumps when he noticed something that made his heart stop. Protruding from the cracked rock was a piece of bronze. But it wasn't just metal. It was a gear, a perfectly cut, geometrically precise triangular gear tooth. Stais immediately hypothesized that it was some sort of ancient astronomical clock. But the scientific community laughed at him. They called his theory absurd. They argued that the ancient Greeks only had static, simple tools. A complex mechanical gear system in 100 BC? Impossible. They assumed it was a much later device, perhaps from the Middle Ages, that had simply been dropped on the ancient shipwreck by coincidence. And so the mystery slept for another 50 years. It wasn't until the latter half of the 20th century, and eventually the early 2000s, that modern science finally caught up to the genius of the ancients. Using advanced X-rays, gamma-ray imaging, and eventually 3D microfocus computed tomography, the same technology used to find microscopic flaws in jet engines, an international team of scientists peered inside the stone crust. What they saw shattered our entire understanding of human history. Inside this corroded lump were at least 30 incredibly sophisticated handcrafted bronze gears. They were perfectly interlocked, utilizing a central drive wheel, complex gear trains, and what engineers call an epicyclic gear system, gears turning within other gears. Hidden beneath the crust were also thousands of microscopic ancient Greek characters, essentially serving as an instruction manual for a machine that shouldn't exist. But what did it actually do? The Antikythera Mechanism was not a clock. It was a highly advanced analog computer designed to calculate the mechanical workings of the cosmos. By turning a single hand crank on the side of the wooden box, the user would set dozens of gears into motion simultaneously. The front dial displayed the position of the sun and the moon in the zodiac, and it tracked the exact 365-day Egyptian calendar, even accounting for leap years. But it went much deeper. It featured a pin-and-slot mechanism that actually modeled the elliptical orbit of the moon, calculating its changing speed across the sky, a concept that wouldn't be fully understood by modern astronomy for centuries. On the back of the device, complex spiral dials tracked the Metonic cycle, a 19-year period used to synchronize lunar and solar calendars. Another dial tracked the Saros cycle, allowing the ancient user to predict the exact hour, color, and direction of solar and lunar eclipses, decades into the future. It even had a small dial that tracked the 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. Recent analysis suggests it also tracked the irregular movements of the 5 planets known to antiquity: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. To put this in perspective, to build this machine, you need more than just advanced astronomy. You need brilliant mathematical theory, and above all, you need a level of metallurgical precision and mechanical engineering that official history says humanity would not achieve until the 14th century, with the invention of the first mechanical clocks in Europe. This is an artifact out of time. So, who built it? The shipwreck was a Roman vessel, likely carrying looted treasures from the Greek islands back to Rome for a triumphant parade. The text on the mechanism points to the island of Rhodes, which was a famous hub for astronomy and mechanical engineering at the time, home to the great astronomer Posidonius. Some historians even whisper a more legendary name, Archimedes. Although Archimedes died a century before this specific device was built, Cicero, the Roman philosopher, wrote about a similar mechanical globe built by Archimedes that could predict eclipses and planetary motions. For centuries, modern historians thought Cicero was just exaggerating or writing myth. Now we know he was telling the absolute truth. The Antikythera Mechanism was likely part of a long tradition of mechanical engineering, a tradition that was brutally cut short. And this leads us to the most terrifying question of all. If humanity was capable of building a mechanical computer 2,000 years ago, why didn't the Industrial Revolution happen in ancient Rome? Why didn't they build steam engines or automated factories? Because the Roman elite cared more about conquest, politics, and war than they did about mechanical engineering. And more importantly, because progress is incredibly fragile. When the Roman Empire fractured, when the great libraries burned, and when the brilliant minds of the ancient world were put to the sword, the knowledge wasn't just temporarily misplaced, it was eradicated. Humanity suffered a collective amnesia. The masterminds who knew how to calculate differential gears died, their blueprints turned to ash, and their prototypes sank to the bottom of the sea. Humanity was thrown into the Dark Ages, forced to relearn everything from scratch. It took us 1,500 years just to get back to the mechanical complexity of that small bronze box. The Antikythera Mechanism is not just a fascinating archaeological curiosity. It is a profound, chilling warning sent directly to us from the ancient world. It tells us that technological superiority is not a permanent state of being. Today, we rely entirely on the fragile ecosystem of silicon microchips, global supply chains, and digital data stored in invisible clouds. But history proves that an advanced civilization can lose its greatest achievements in the blink of an eye. If our modern systems were to collapse tomorrow due to a solar flare, global war, or resource depletion, how much of our knowledge would survive? Would the smartphones and quantum computers of today become the confusing, meaningless artifacts of tomorrow, dug up by future generations who can't comprehend how we built them? We lost 1,000 years of progress once. The corroded gears of Antikythera prove it. The question is, could we lose it all again? Thank you for joining us on this journey beyond the known. If you want to continue exploring the hidden truths and forgotten mysteries of our world, hit the subscribe button and never stop questioning the narrative. Because the past is never truly dead.